Nevada's perilous Lake Mead drought supplies 40 million Americans with water now at its lowest level since it began in the 1930s, with 20 million dependent on drinking water and electricity is exceeded. Never before has Lake Mead been so important. Drought. Unfortunately, however, this important reservoir is depleting at alarming rates. Recent changes in global climatic conditions have led to receding water bodies in recent decades, adding Lake Mead to the list of dried-up river sources. There seems to be more behind the lake, but it's dropping faster than the apparent level. We'll take a look at the real reason Lake Mead is drying up and what that means for the dozens of states and millions of people who depend on its existence. Created by the Hoover Dam on the Colorado River, Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States, straddles the states of Nevada and Arizona and provides electricity to hundreds of thousands of local residents. The current drought in the western United States is rapidly approaching Deadpool water levels of about 1040.71 feet this summer, the lowest level in the lake since the early 1930s. Precipitation is one of the main factors that determine the water level of lakes. It varies seasonally as snow flows into the valley from the Rocky Mountains in the winter. However, climate change is making it increasingly difficult to predict seasonal weather patterns. Thus, despite the recent rise in water levels, the lake is only 27% full. Another factor affecting the lake, perhaps due to poor planning of the Colorado River Basin nearly a century ago, a treaty regulating water from the river was signed in 1922 by the states of California, Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. Signed. They had to choose a precise number to base the river's average annual flow on, and settled on 15 million acres. They based their decisions on flow meters that have recorded an average of 17 million acre-feet per year since 1890. However, this was an exaggeration, as home bells were occurring in the Colorado Basin at the time. California and Arizona are believed to get about 3 times as much water from the lake as Arizona does. But both states have reduced the amount of water they use to protect their lakes, and the New Mexico, we have a treaty that guarantees the state. Is 1.5 million acre-foot stretch of water on the Colorado River passed Congress in 1940. For most of the early 20th century, the river flow seemed endless. Nobody was using the water fairly, and everyone had a comfortable buffer in the event of drought. So the problem was no. But the 1956 Colorado River Storage Project had a new plan to use the river's water to within 1/10 of its projected capacity. The proposal was expected to build a vast new infrastructure. Like his brothers, he facilitated the colonization of the American West. The 1957 highway project reclaims arid land for agriculture and urbanization by building new dams, reservoirs, canals, and power lines. There was only one major problem with the larger version of the Los Angeles Basin development in California. The design included an expanded flow. All continued to do so for the next 24 years, under the false assumption of distributing about 16.5 million acres of water each year, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. Alarm bells were rung. Over the years, there have been many severe droughts that water planners have had to deal with before finding new insights on tree ring analysis and carbon-14. All living things absorb carbon-14, but when they die, they absorb very little, and nitrogen-14 is produced by the radioactive decay of carbon-14. Therefore, if we can know how much carbon-14 a dead organism has absorbed during its lifetime, we can measure how much carbon-14 is left in dead organic matter. Determine how long it has been since you died. Paleontologists had to study prehistoric climates more than 15,000 years ago to ensure carbon accuracy. 14 dates. This included closely tracking changes in temperature and humidity to measure plant growth rates. Although there was no mention of it in the geological record, the growth rings of certain small trees, known as bristlecone pines, were an important early indicator. A permanent relic of the Ice Age, this tree can live for over 3,000 years and is only found in remote areas of the Southwest. Pine trees develop hundreds of annual rings, thicker in dry, cool years, and thinner in wet, warm years, were compared with those found in the wood of other known ancient trees. Some of these were long dead. They then expanded this study to include even older, semi-petrified timber, lake bed sediments, and other indicators. We wrote computer programs that model the variables that influence and fine-tuned them over time until they matched the paleontological record. By the 1990s, these systems could accurately predict growth anywhere in the western United States over the past 15,000 years, and could be used to predict future conditions. At that time, it turned out that the cycle from wet to dry weather is repeated in the Colorado Basin. There's nothing quite like a calendar, but it's usually an 800-year drying cycle. It is then moistened and then dried again. The wet side of the cycle peaked around 1922, and then began to decline naturally. Now, in 2022, the watershed is entering a long dry cycle that has not yet bottomed out. Ironic, for a while, everything would have been fine. However, from the 1950s to the 1980s, without a sharp increase in consumption, Lake Mead would be virtually full, and there would have been no call for stricter conservation measures. Population growth was the logical rationale for expanding farmland and irrigation, but wasting all that water and everything overturned the sensibility of the 1950s. The main problem was that most of the irrigated land was not suitable for growing staple crops such as maize, wheat, and potatoes. You can grow them, but the cost of production and transportation is higher than their market value. So tomatoes, lettuce, cucumbers, and spinach were the trucks that were paid to grow them. The U.S. government helped crush competition to create a market for vegetables in the Colorado Basin, but they were already thriving elsewhere. But the supermarket chain, with state backing, turned to sources in Arizona, and established growers who hadn't previously been crushed by California vegetables found the best customers in the country. To carry out his parliamentary duties, the Colorado River Storage Project has had to demonstrate, at least for some time, the benefits achieved this way. Clearly, the amount of water used, primarily to support redundant agriculture, has never been sustainable. Farms will employ more people than if Arizona hadn't forced local producers out of the market. Despite this, there is less hunger today than there was in 1950, when there were 2.5 billion people on the planet to feed, which is thanks to global food production that has kept up. However, the states that would suffer most from the devastation, strangely, aren't Arizona or California, but Nevada, Las Vegas, an extremely hot and dry city that was purposefully planned without having any genuine water resources of its. Was a problem in itself said to occur from the onset. It might, on the surface, seem improbable that Las Vegas would run out of water from Lake Mead. Since bearing a severe Rocky Mountain drought that lasts longer than a few years, the Colorado River will continue to flow, but it is highly probable that before 2030, the cost of water will soar to unaffordable levels that a large portion of Las Vegas's population will be compelled to relocate. Businesses will start to reduce operations in the city and the surrounding areas even before then, because the cost of water will affect their bottom lines. Fewer travelers will come to Las Vegas as a result, and the exodus from the city will. And even before that happens, Las Vegas might be compelled to halt or postpone a lot of infrastructure and development projects after realizing that they might be for nothing. In other words, even if we continue the scenario to its suggested end, and Lake Mead does dry up, Las Vegas will have shrunk so much before that point that its water shortage will be relatively unimportant. Of course, in a bid to prepare or possibly mitigate the eventual effects of Lake Mead, eventually drying up Las Vegas has been covertly trying to purchase water rights from ranches and other sources 100 or more miles away to eventually import water via a huge pipeline. This has caused issues with other governments, particularly Lincoln. No one wishes to give up their limited aquifers for Las Vegas or any other city to obtain water from the depleting reservoir. Las Vegas has been working on a new water intake from Lake Mead. It is 135 feet deeper from various sources. It is seen at the most likely asked, as if the lake can be artificially filled, and experts have been taken to giving their opinions, stating that while it isn't technically impossible, the manpower and economic cost to undergo such a project would be astronomical and thus impossible to carry out. Others argue that the first step to restoration of Lake Mead would be shutting down the truck farms and replacing them with native vegetation. Soon, if Lake Mead is to continue to function as, but doing so would require political will, which Arizona presently lacks as a result of persistent lobbying or current water users and land developers. In the current political atmosphere, the government hasn't made any concrete plans, and if nothing changes, the data indicate that Lake Mead will effectively be out by 2030 with Las Vegas vanishing into the. Do you still think anything can be done to salvage the situation? Let us know in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like and share it with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for more, and click the bell icon so you get notified whenever a new video drops.